our first speaker for the week, to kick the entire program off, is Rabbi Tobias. Rabbi Tobias is the Dean of the Scholars Program at Magen High School. Most of you know him and have spoken to him and have heard him before. Rabbi Tobias is our wonder kid here at Beth, heading the young adult Minyan, and so much more, including working so hard on an education program, on adult classes, on Onik Shabbatot for the young adults, high school and college age, and his reach in the Knesset and his effect at so young an age is really limitless. So we're so thankful to have him here, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing him. With no further ado, please give your attention to Rabbi Tobias.
Good evening, thank you for coming. And I want to thank the committee for asking me to participate and really say that it's an honor and a privilege to be kicking off this event, and I'm excited for a week ahead of education and of conversation like you mentioned. We have a couple of things planned for tonight. I hope we don't run out of time. We're going to start with a TED Talk. It's a little under 20 minutes. We have to cut it short, but we'll see how it goes. So give your attention to the screen, and we'll discuss when it's done, and I think it'll make for a lively discussion. You can see where the video is going. At the end, he makes the judge do it all again, and the car parks right in front of the judge who's standing on the curb. The individual sitting in the passenger seat sticks out his hand at the judge as though to shoot him, and there is absolutely nothing you can see except for complete darkness. That's 3 feet in front of the judge. Needless to say, the young man was exonerated after spending 21 years in prison. By a show of hands, how many people read this sign as saying, if you see someone drowning, LOL, call 911? Let's be honest, people. Raise your hands if that's what you see. Yes, in fact, we see what we want to see. The sign actually says, if you see someone drowning, call 911, and there's a photograph or a diagram in the middle of a figure who's drowning with his hands up. In fact, we do see what we want to see. When I saw the video for the first time, you can imagine that it was incredibly disturbing and unnerving for 2 reasons. One, to think about the fact that a young man could spend the better part of his life, 21 years in prison, should bother anyone and everyone. But 2, from my own life context, it calls into question a very serious issue. Judaism, our legal system, our punishment system, is based solely, well, we can discuss that later, but is based primarily on eyewitness testimony. Is this an attack on the Jewish legal system? Some facts before we begin. Research has shown, and there was a book that was written in 1932, it's going back a few years, by Edmund Brocard, that showed that eyewitness misidentification is the leading contributing factor of wrongful convictions. The man in the video talked about the Innocence Project. Since 1989, between 1989 and 2012, more than 2,000 people were exonerated based on evidence that came in later, after they had already been found guilty based on eyewitness testimony, spending an average of 10 years, a minimum of 1, and a maximum of 33 in prison. Again, that should bother the average person. To think that you could be at the wrong place at the wrong time, that someone could confuse your photograph with somebody else's, that someone could be out to get you and essentially testify and put you or someone you love behind bars or in other situations, is very problematic. And so I watched the video, and I was encouraged to go back to the sources. Lots and lots and lots of sources. We don't have time to go through all of them. I want to focus on some of the more fundamental, basic ones and walk through the Jewish legal system with you and see what we discover. We start very basic. The Pisukim and the Parashiot that we read very recently discuss how eyewitness testimony works. Oh, suddenly the clicker is working. And the Pasuk says, Al pi shenayim edim o ashelosha edim yumat hamet. Based on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, can you put someone to death? Lo yumat al pi ed echad. You cannot incriminate someone based on the testimony of 1 witness. Another pasuk very similarly says, Lo yakum ed echad ve'ish l'chol avon l'chol chatat. One person cannot testify against someone else's crime. V'chol chet asher yecheta al pi shenei edim or al pi shelosha edim yakum davar. 2 or 3. That's the number we're looking for. If it's more, it's great. Nothing less than 2. Rashi on the pasuk adds something that to the obvious eye seems basic and banal. But if I focus on what he says, it opens up the door to a profound explanation of how a legal system should work. Says Rashi, Ed Echad, on the words Ed Echad, Ze B'nei Av. Kol Ed Sheba Torah Shnayim. Unless otherwise stated, any time the Torah says the concept of testimony, it has to be 2 people. This is a paradigm example, this pasuk, that creates the icon, the legal system of edut. He goes on to say, Al pi shenayim edim, velo sheyichtevenu edutam beigeret v'yishlechu lebedin, velo sheyamod turgeman ben ha'edim uben hadayanim. They can't write down their testimony, they can't speak to you through a translator, they can't give it to you secondhand. Eyewitness testimony means eyewitness testimony. The guy is in the room. Why the specifics of 2? And what does the Torah add by telling me, or 3, or 4, or 8, or 12, or 72? And I know you have the answer. But you have to understand the profundity of what that means and juxtapose it with the American legal system. Because the American legal system says, our system of justice is deeply concerned that no person who is innocent of a crime be convicted of it. In order to avoid that, a jury must consider identification testimony with great care, especially when the only evidence identifying the defendant as the perpetrator comes from 1 witness. But that's allowed. That means if somebody really doesn't like me, and they come to testify against me, and the jury buys the testimony, I'm done. Because the law is not so much concerned with the number of witnesses. The Jewish legal system is. But the American legal system is not so much concerned with the number of witnesses, called as with the quality of the testimony given. That's what we're basing it on. But if you practiced enough, if you're a great actor, if you know how to play the system, innocent people are incarcerated. In fact, more than 2,000 of them in the last 23 years. And so we return to the Jewish legal system. There's a Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin that asks, Ketzad me'ayimin et ha'edim. How do I translate the word ma'ayimin? How do you drive crazy? How do you instigate? How do you make sure that the edim that are coming to testify are true and don't have an agenda? We begin and we say the preliminary process is I go to Joey and to Victor, not at the same time, and ask them, are you guesstimating? Is this secondhand knowledge? Were you there? If convinced of their testimony, we then tell them that they better be prepared to answer several very specific questions. And if they can't answer them properly, or if they're found to be lying, then perhaps what they're trying to do to somebody else will happen to them. And perhaps, most interestingly enough, we give those edim musar. We give them a warning. I just want you to understand that you are in a court of law. And based on what you say, that person right there, who's a father, a mother, a daughter, a grandmother, a cousin, somebody that somebody else loves, can possibly die or spend the rest of his life in jail. Are you ready to testify and hang that person's life in your hands? Because the pasuk says, after Cain killed Hevel, Kol deme achicha tzoakim alai. The bloods of your brother Hevel are calling out to me, God says to Cain, and the Mefarshim ask, what do you mean bloods? It's one person, he killed his brother. And the Mefarshim comment and say, well, you may have taken the life of one human being, essentially you've killed an entire world. Because he would have got married, and he would have procreated, and he would have had kids, and they would have had kids, and they would have created another line of human beings who could have added tremendous things to the world, but you killed him. And so, witnesses, before you sit on this stand and you testify, I want you to understand the ramifications of what you're about to do. Should they choose to want to continue, the investigative process begins. And the Torah is unapologetic, ladies and gentlemen, unapologetic about its search for truth. It says 3 times in the parashiot that we just read. V'darashta v'chakarta v'sha'alta hetev. You better question them, and you better question them again, and when you're done with that, you better question them again. V'hinei emet nachon hadavar, because the Jewish legal system seeks the truth and nothing but the truth. In the American legal system, you might say it, but if 2,000 people are behind bars and they're innocent, that doesn't say much for the statement. You better be sure that what you said was done was done. Once again, investigation. Seek the truth. And that's what our judges do. They look for testimony that is false. The reason that the Torah is so specific and adamant about 2 witnesses is very simple, but it's also very profound. The testimony has to be corroborated. You know, there's an anecdote that we tell the high school kids all the time when they attempt to cheat, which they never do. 4 boys were scheduled to have a final. They didn't want to take the final that day. They wanted extra time to study, get the questions to the test. So they arrive in school and they miss the final, and they tell the teacher, you know, we were on the way, we got a flat tire, and the car broke down, AAA, by the time they got there, we did the best we can, foam died, we want to take it tomorrow. And the teacher says, no problem. I just have one question. But first we have to take our seats. You sit in that corner, you sit in that corner, you sit in that corner, you sit in that corner. Writes the question on the board. Which tire was it? How good is your story? The Torah wants to know. If you're acting, we will find you. Because we will ask question after question after question after question to the point where you will be so sick of questions, almost as sick as I am at the thought that you might be prosecuting an innocent person. And so let's go through the questions that are asked. This is stage 1. Stage 1, part 1 is Hakira. We will ask questions about time and place. Which cycle of the Yovel count was it? There's a 50-year cycle, 7 cycles of 7. Which cycle of those 7 are we in? What year of the cycle? What month? What date? What day of the week? What time and where? But the interesting thing about it is, if a witness says, well, it happened yesterday, that's not good enough. If I ask anybody here what yesterday was, you could automatically think of that. No, you need to say what yesterday was. Yesterday was September 18th, in the month of September, in the year 2016, in the third cycle of the Yobel month, at this time in this place. Because yesterday is not an answer. And if then I ask you what yesterday was, and it's an automated answer, that's a red flag. Because his life is on the line. Automated answers don't work in this court of law. Genuine answers work in this court of law. Because if that was your brother, you would want to make sure that the witness sitting on that stand is absolutely 100% sure of what he has to say. Part 2 is Didisha. The facts of the case. Murder case. What was the murder weapon? How did he kill him? What was the surrounding of that area? If he worshipped idols, what kind of idol did he worship and how? If he ate on Yom Kippur, what did he eat and how much? Oh, and by the way, the only way to get into the doors of a courtroom as a witness is if you first warned the person before they did what they're about to do. So that means I'm about to see this guy eat on Yom Kippur and I say, hey, Dave, today is Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to eat. And he says, I don't really care. Gummy bears, can't give them up. And he eats on Yom Kippur. And then you take him to court. And then you testify. And then you answer all of these questions. Then we can incarcerate him. Because then I can rely on the fact that it's true. Some important pieces of information. Only one witness at a time. I'm not sure, and Jeffrey will correct me if I'm wrong. In an American court of law, it's possible that another witness could be sitting in the room while one is speaking. Not really. Okay, good. So they got that one down. Baruch Hashem. Great. Corroboration is essential. To the point where in any of these questions, in parts 1 and 2, if Victor, witness number 1, gives me all the answers, he says, what month is it? And he answers it was September. And I ask Joey, and Joey says, I don't remember. Sorry. Case dismissed. I don't know is not an answer. Which it says there, and as we mentioned, warning had to be given in order for you to incriminate, to testify against another human being. That's rounds 1 and 2. Oh, sorry, that's round 1, part 1 and 2. Then we get to round 2, which is called bidikot. The Od Marbi Livdok says that Rambam Ha'adim b'dvarim she'ena mikar be'aidut ve'ena tiduya bahem. Then we ask some questions about the peripherals of the case. Vehem nikraim bidikot. This is the part called bidikot. Anyone who can ask more questions, how Jewish we are, the more questions you ask, the better off you are. What color clothes were they wearing? What did the ground look like? Was it a sunny or a cloudy day? What kind of stems did the figs on the tree have? The Mishnah records a case where somebody said this murder took place under a fig tree. They asked witness number 1, what color were the stems on the figs? And one said black and the other said white. No corroboration. Case dismissed. Why? Why? It's very simple. Because 3,000 years ago, the Torah understood the fallibility of the human mind. Because 3,000 years ago, the Torah understood that when we have memories, much of those memories are recreated. And so I saw a murder scene, and then I walked away, and I saw a guy walk behind me, and he was wearing red pants. And the memories are blurred. And so when I go to testify and the guy asks me what color clothes were they wearing, my answer is red. Because that's what's in my head. Well, if he says red and he says white, the case is closed. And so you ask of the relevancy of Judaism in the 21st century. And I propose, and I put forth, and I say that the Torah is far advanced. Because if the Jewish legal system understood the fallibility of the human mind 3,000 years ago to the point where it said, all of these things have to happen based on 2 witnesses and no less, and the American legal system is still getting there, or hasn't got there, then what is to be said about the system of law that we have other than the fact that it understood the human psyche before the psych people understood the human psyche? To the point where the Mishnah says, and you all know it, Sanhedrin hahoreget ehad b'shavua nikret hovlanit. A bet din that murdered a human being once every 7 years is considered a murderous bet din. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah Omer, Rabbi Eliezer the son of Azariah says, Echad b'shiv'im shana. No. If they murdered someone once every 70 years, it was a murderous bet din. Now, it doesn't mean they can't be punished. The Torah is not in the business of putting guilty people back on the streets. There's prison, there are fines, there's a slap on the wrist, there's ostracization. Whatever it may be, we are not in the business of putting guilty people back on the streets, but we certainly are in the business of seeking and finding truth and understanding that the human mind is fallible. And so before you put Mr. X behind bars for life or put him to death, you better understand the significance and the meaning of what you're about to do. Why 2? Because they have to corroborate. But the Torah says 2 or 3 or 4 or 72. Which brings up another interesting point in the Jewish legal system. For those of you who have children who got married, or for those of you who are married, you sat at the table and you signed the marriage contract, and your parent signed you away. In the Jewish legal system, a relative cannot be a witness. Because if my estranged wife wants to put me behind bars, who's to say she can't create a great story? She knows me perhaps better than anybody else. If my father wants to get me off scot-free, who's to say he's not going to create a story to get me off scot-free? That's what we call nogea badavar, someone who has a biased opinion. And so here what the Torah has to say, if 3 people, so I have Joey and Victor and Morris, witness the case together, and they come to testify that Mr. X killed Mr. Y on the corner of Avenue P at 2 o'clock on September 19th, 2016, and here's the and the judges say, Morris, are you related to the defendant? And Morris says, yes, I am. Very simple solution. Cancel out Morris. Joey and Victor stay. Yes? Wrong. The Torah says, if any one of the people in that bunch is related, the whole thing goes. I don't know what you talked about on the way here. I don't know what kind of story you made up. I don't know if you're being paid off by his estranged wife or being paid off by his father. And if there's family involved, the whole thing goes. Because truth is unbiased. It's unadulterated. It's clear. It is or it is not. And the Jewish legal system, ahead of its time, far advanced, understanding the psyche of the human being and the fallibility of the human mind, says that if you, sitting in 2016, could read a sign that says, if you see someone drowning, LOL, dial 911, you better be sure that the framework in which you live changes your perspective. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand your own self. But the Torah does. Because 20 years ago, if I asked anyone to read that sign, nobody was saying LOL. But times change. And perspectives change. And the way we look at the world around us changes. Because we're human beings. And human beings, as great as they are, make mistakes. And they're fallible. And they don't always get it right. And so the Torah says, you can't have one witness, and you can't have a relative, and if you're coming to testify that he belongs in prison, you better be ready to sit and answer a lot of questions. He mentioned in the video that the police had a suspect within 24 hours. There's a Mishnah in Masechet Rosh Hashanah in which Rabban Gamliel questions the people who came to testify about the new moon. And do you know how long he questioned them for? 24 hours. For the moon. Not to put someone in jail, not to kill somebody, not to take money from him. Granted, the moon is a very serious thing in Jewish religion. But simply to understand the moon. And he did this, by the way. The Mishnah said he had pictures on his cave wall, on his tent wall, of all the ways that the moons could look at that point in time during the year. Did it look like this? Did it look like this? Did it look like this? No. You telling me it looked like that? Impossible. Based on our calculations, we know that the moon could not have possibly looked the way you say it looked on this date and this time. Impossible. Forensic science? 3,300 years ago? Could it possibly be? Judaism staying relevant to the 21st century. I think, certainly when it comes to the legal system, the understanding of the human mind, the fact that we make mistakes, the Torah got it right. So right that when I unpack the Pisukim, it blows my mind to think that what the world is coming to realize today, we had 3,300 years ago. I don't know if we have too much time left over. Q&A for 2 minutes? Okay, we'll go with Q&A. Mal.
Great presentation, Rabbi.
Thank you.
So today we have, first of all, one thing, you said you have to give the warning. Don't you also have to give the punishment?
Yes, correct.
Second thing is, say we have videotape. We have cameras all over the place. They caught these guys yesterday. They have tape.
Right.
How would Jewish Torah look at that?
So it's a great question, and there are really two new technological advances that we have. One is videotape, which according to Halakha is problematic for the following very simple reason. And that is technology has outdone itself. In that, if I'm good enough, I could put any of you at any place, at any time, basically doing anything that I wanted with the right videographer. And so the Torah is going to say, or the halachic perspective is going to say, as long as that ability is there, I can't rely on something that can be manipulated and tampered with. And so currently, the Torah is going to say video footage has gotten so advanced that it outdid itself, and therefore makes it inadmissible evidence. Joey, go ahead.
So the whole premise of this is, from a local perspective, not putting the wrong guy behind bars.
Right.
So the flip side of that is how many guilty people are going free because of the interrogation that's happening in the Jewish system.
Great. So I'm happy you asked that, because the last line of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva אומרים, אילו היינו בסנהדרין לא נהרג אדם מעולם. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva say, if we were in charge, nobody would ever get killed. And the Mishnah says, Rashbag omer, af hen marbin shuvchei damim b'Yisrael. He says, Chazak baruch, but that's too much. Now you're exaggerating on the other side. There are guilty people. Some people have to get killed. Some people have to go to prison. And so striking a balance is true. You're right. And we're not in the business of putting murderers back on the streets by any way, shape, or form. And striking that balance is up to the questioning process, the investigative process, and the people sitting there to determine. But certainly the Mishnah understood the ramifications of swinging the pendulum too far in one direction. Okay, I think we'll take one more. Yeah, one more? Oh, okay, I'm gonna go with ladies. Go ahead.
So your example had, you were comparing the United States where they put them in prison for life. Judaism is going to put them in prison. They're not going to murder them.
Well,
so
depending.
if there's enough evidence, I'm just using
Right,
comparison.
correct. Depending
we're not
on.
putting the murderer on the street, we're going to put him in prison.
Right, depending on the.
It's similar to the American system. The difference is two witnesses that.
Right.
The
No, no.
deterrent is going to be prison in the Jewish system,
If he's
not murder.
right, so
that's what we've always learned.
if he's found to be guilty, but the nuances are not damning enough to do the death penalty, then it's possible he can go to prison. Again, it's hard to make a blanket statement of what would happen without having a specific case. But yes, it's possible he can go to prison, and whatever the ramifications would be. Again, the investigative process being so involved, the hope would be that by the time they get to the end of it, the right choice is made based on the system as we have it.
It may be that the American system is detailed. That would be good.
Right. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, we gotta have Gabby. Okay, and then we'll end. Go ahead, Gabby.
Just going furthering on Joey's statement about the greater good and the fact that, like he said, many murderers will be left on the street, and we don't want to have any collateral damage of even one person dying. Why would Hashem create the human to be so fallible when why wouldn't he be able to have the recollection that he needs so that there could be precise justice in the world in these type of cases?
Okay, so now we've moved into the Jewish philosophy realm of the class, and the short answer is fallibility is what makes us human. Without the ability to make mistakes, we would essentially also be robots, and life would be pointless if there was nothing to learn from. If everything was perfect and 100%, it's too easy. And we don't like easy. We don't like the path of least resistance. Thank you for joining me. And